I'm Dr. William Davis. Thank you for signing up for the emails, the newsletters, the news, the important events, and other messages I want to pass on to you. Now, I promised you to share 7 things your doctor doesn't want you to know. These are important to understand because they help in making sure that you remain or become undoctored, that is, empowered in your own health and less reliant on the doctor, the healthcare system, who often don't have your best interests in mind, right? They're often more interested in revenues for the healthcare system or adhering to guidelines and rules that are often written by the drug and medical device industry, not about your health. So, 7 basic truths your doctor does not want you to know. 1. The doctor-patient relationship is voluntary. Now, that may seem obvious, but people often forget that when they're in the doctor's office and the doctor is ordering his patient to take this, do this. You know what? You're there by your own accord. He's not there giving you orders. He gives orders to his staff, his nurses and physical therapists, because they work for him or the hospital. But you don't work for the doctor. Just like you go to an auto mechanic, you don't work for the auto mechanic. He works for you. It is a voluntary relationship. So any exchange is entirely voluntary. You can choose to take his advice or not take that advice. 2. Many of the trappings of healthcare are intended to intimidate you. You know, the use of the white coat, it's not really necessary. In fact, it's quite filthy. It's filled with microbes and adds to hospital infections, for instance. It's worn to intimidate you, to make you think that this person is in a position of information authority and you should listen. It's known that this placebo effect adds to confidence so that there's more likely a placebo effect that affects a cure. That's what the white coat is about. It's not about cleanliness. It's about intimidation. Long waits is also a form of intimidation, as if it's somehow a privilege for you to finally get to the doctor or the healthcare test you're waiting for. So those waits are often, now sometimes they're real, but often waits are put there on purpose to intimidate you. Scrub outfits. Now, if you're in surgery, the doctor's in surgery, they need a scrub outfit, right? But what about just walking around? They often don't need it. Sometimes it's just convenience. It's comfortable to wear. But you know what? Sometimes it's there to intimidate. So recognize that a lot of what goes on in healthcare is meant to intimidate you into submitting to their wishes. 3. Much of what the doctor knows and tells you did not come from a thorough review of the clinical studies and conversations with health experts and scientists. It came from that good-looking sales representative, or the free dinner they got from the drug industry, or the week all expenses paid in Orlando paid for by that medical device manufacturer. That is how an astounding amount of the knowledge your doctor has was acquired, not from formal education, but from marketing. What does that mean to you? You're often being information that is nothing more than repackaged marketing. So be very aware, be very skeptical often of what doctors tell you. 4. Most clinical studies are paid for by the drug industry, by the medical device industry. And this is an issue that has grown over the last couple of decades. Now, the studies paid for by industry dwarf the number of studies that are independent, objective, paid for by taxpayer money, etc., or by foundations. What that means is much of the studies that your doctor reads about or reviews, or the sales representative tells him about, is nothing more than marketing. If a company paid for the performance of a study, it almost always comes out in favor of that product. So that's not real science. That's just thinly veiled marketing. So be aware. Even if the doctor says there are studies to this effect, most of them are paid for by commercial interests. 5. You have direct access to your laboratory values and even your medical record. So if you call the doctor's office and say, I'd like my results of my cholesterol panel or blood sugar or whatever, and they say, you can't have it. It's the office's or the doctor's property. That is not true. By law, nationwide. Those are your property. You have every right to it. If you get resistance, you can report it to the medical board. You can even go to the laboratory directly, and they must give you those results. They cannot be kept from you. They are your property. Now, if the doctor refuses even to perform a test, a lab test, and even some other imaging type tests like an ultrasound, you can, in most states, get them on your own. You can go around the doctor. You can even bill the insurance company yourself. That's a headache of its own, but you can do that if you'd like. If, for instance, you want a 25 hydroxy vitamin D level to assess your vitamin D, or you want to add a free T3 and a reverse T3 to your thyroid panel because your doctor refused to do it, you can get them on your own. A finger stick or a blood draw. There are many services that do that, and you have access to that information even without the doctor. New York, New Jersey, and California keep you from doing that, but there are still ways to work around that too. 6, if a request you make to the doctor is dismissed, or he or she makes fun of it, it's often painted as being for your safety. Well, that's not always true. In fact, lots of times it's because the doctor is ignorant. I've heard this many countless times. I went to my doctor and I asked for an advanced lipoprotein analysis, the test that is superior and preferable to crude, outdated, unreliable cholesterol testing. And I asked specifically for an NMR panel, a nuclear magnetic resonance. That's just one form of advanced lipoprotein testing. And the doctor says, no, that's stupid. You don't need it. Your cholesterol tests are fine, or you're on a cholesterol drug, you don't need those tests, or insurance doesn't pay for it. That is all untrue. They are relatively inexpensive, they are readily accessible, and insurance almost always pays for it. Why would the doctor tell you such lies? Because he or she is lazy, or just doesn't feel like doing it, or doesn't understand the test, doesn't want to take the trouble to educate himself or herself about what advanced lipoproteins mean and look like. So don't always take no as the final answer. It's often what they're really saying is, I don't feel like it. I don't know what that is. I don't feel like educating myself. 7, most doctors are now employees of healthcare systems. They work for the healthcare system. You know what that means? I have lots of friends who are doctors. They tell me they get a larger end of quarter bonus with the greater revenues they drive for their healthcare system. So guess what? That shoulder discomfort you got after gardening for the first time in a while in springtime, that the doctor says you could be a walking time bomb, and you get a stress nuclear study for $4,800. And then you get a heart catheterization because the stress nuclear study was unclear. It showed a questionable abnormality. That's another $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. Maybe you had to see an electrophysiologist and have a tilt study because they saw some kind of a minor rhythm issue on your EKG. You had this test, that test. Your shoulder pain turned into a $130,000 hospital bill. But it drives a larger bonus for your doctor. So be very careful. Why would you go to a used car lot and take everything this car salesman says at face value? Well, of course not. He's selling you. He's trying to sell you something. The doctor, likewise, is trying to sell you something. If he's telling you to have a very expensive procedure, be skeptical, be cynical, ask questions, get another opinion. Don't always accept what they tell you at face value because there's too much money involved. And we're talking about lots of money. We're not talking about a few dollars. We're talking about tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars at stake here. So, these are 7 things it is so important for you to know to be armed, and so that you are more effective at remaining undoctored, yet free of health problems with health that is superior to what you would have achieved through the conventional efforts of the healthcare system. And these are the kinds of things I talk about further in the Undoctored book, in the Undoctored websites, and the mailings that we'll be sending you. So stay with this conversation, give us feedback, give us some ideas of the things you want to hear more about.